are 8 seed oils. I call them the hateful 8. They are corn, canola, cottonseed, soy, sunflower, safflower, which you're going to see in the grocery store. And then these other 2 are mostly in restaurants, rice bran and grapeseed oil. If you're not avoiding these things, then the average American gets 80% of their fat calories from these things, right? That leaves only 20% from actual natural whole food fat sources, whether it's plants or animals. And it's like somewhere between 30 and 50% of their total calories for the day. So this is like the single most common ingredient in many people's diets, and nobody's talking about it.
From the Weston A. Price Foundation, welcome to the Wise Traditions podcast for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health.
Hey, Hilda here. Have you heard of PUFAs? They're polyunsaturated fatty acids that are inflammatory and can lead to all kinds of chronic conditions like obesity and diabetes. These are found in industrial seed oils primarily, the ones that we cook with and are in so many of our processed foods. This is episode 263, and our guest today is researcher and physician Dr. Cate Shanahan. Dr. Cate is a board-certified family physician with over 20 years of clinical experience. She is also the author of The Fat Burn Fix, Deep Nutrition and Food Rules. Today, Cate talks with us about PUFAs and what she calls the hateful 8, the industrial seed oils that act like toxins in our body, accumulate in our fat, and increase feelings of hunger, hamper our ability to utilize stored energy, and, as we alluded to earlier, contribute to many chronic diseases. Cate talks about how to eliminate these oils from our diet and which oils to consume instead for increased energy and vitality. Before we get into the convo, join me at the Wise Traditions Conference, you guys. It is on. It's in Atlanta, Georgia, November 13th to the 15th. All ages and stages are welcome. Staying healthy in a toxic world is the theme, with top-notch speakers who will address how to deal with 5G, holistic dentistry, homeopathy, homesteading, how to make broth and stocks, and much more. Go to wisetraditions.org to sign up today, and do it now while you can, while the early bird pricing is still in effect. And if we have to cancel for some reason, do not worry, you will be entitled to a full refund. I hope to see you in November. This episode is brought to you in part by bovine tracheal cartilage by Ancestral Supplements. Ancestral Supplements makes New Zealand-sourced, nose-to-tail organ meats, bone marrow, and bovine tracheal cartilage in simple, convenient gelatin capsules. Bovine tracheal cartilage has unique and powerful effects on wound healing, immune conditions, joint health, and other conditions considered to be treatment-resistant to conventional therapies. And bovine tracheal cartilage provides concentrated amounts of connective tissue, immunoregulators, and cartilage building blocks that are now missing from the modern diet. So visit ancestralsupplements.com to see what they can do for you. Ancestral Supplements, putting back in what the modern world left out. Oh, and stick around till the end of the podcast. I always read a letter from our journal or a review from Apple Podcasts. It's super encouraging to hear. This is Holistic Hilda, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. Welcome to Wise Traditions, Cate.
Thanks so much for inviting me onto your show.
Well, we love your book, Deep Nutrition, and we know you have a lot to offer our audience. And I want to begin today our conversation talking about oils. Particularly, I've heard that PUFAs are very damaging to our health. Tell us a story of a client you've worked with who changed their oils and improved their health.
So one of the recent experiences working with somebody is a classic. And it's in fact the reason that I wrote my latest book, The Fat Burn Fix. She was a type 2 diabetic, kind of a postmenopausal age, early 50s, had type 2 diabetes for years and was so excited about keto and intermittent fasting. She dove right into it. She managed to lose a lot of weight, but unfortunately, her energy just was like mysteriously bad. And, she had actually lost nearly 100 pounds. So
Wow.
She was so disappointed that like all that work hadn't led to her having just a bundle of energy, like everything that she was reading about keto and so on was promising. And so when she got a hold of the Fat Burn Fix and started swapping out the seed oils immediately, like within the first day, and then it just kept getting better. She noticed that her energy was more sustained between meals. And ultimately, it was sustained all day and, suppresses her hunger. And that's one of the things that folks don't register as technically as we should as a key indicator of our metabolic health. It's our hunger, how often we're hungry, and the absence of hunger in spite of maybe skipping a meal or something is a key indicator of extreme metabolic health and what we call metabolic flexibility, that you can burn your body fat.
That is so encouraging. I've actually personally noticed that I'm not as hungry as I used to be. And I guess that means I'm eating the right kind of fats to sustain my health and energy, as you're saying.
Yeah, it could also mean that you're also including some of the healthy, slow digesting carbohydrates, which one of the things I love about the Weston Price Foundation is that you do really promote, you're not anti-grain necessarily, like some of these, or even specifically anti-carb. You just want to do the carbs right, which involves sprouting beans and sprouting seeds and stuff like that. It's so important. And the sprouted grain bread actually really has a dramatically different impact on your metabolism and improves your energy in ways that even whole wheat bread can't.
Oh my gosh, this is fascinating. And I would love to keep talking about bread, but I want to pivot though, because I really wanted to focus on PUFAs today. Can you first tell us what they are and what they do to us?
So there are 8 seed oils. I call them the hateful 8. They are corn, canola, cottonseed, soy, sunflower, safflower, which you're going to see in the grocery store. And then these other 2 are mostly in restaurants, like quality restaurants, rice bran and grapeseed oil. And I call them the hateful 8, and I have a website and infographic just so that you can snap a picture of the hateful 8 infographic and pull it up whenever you're shopping, so you can look in every single thing that you purchase from the grocery store, because they filter into our bodies through so many foods. And they're bad for us because the polyunsaturates that they contain, they're very, very high in polyunsaturates. And we actually only need maybe 1 to 2% of our total daily calories to be polyunsaturates. And when we eat more than this, they act like toxins in our body because they actually accumulate in our body fat and other tissues as well, but primarily in the body fat, where they promote inflammation because they're unstable. And so we get this body fat that's inflammatory and makes our cells incapable of generating energy efficiently with our body fat. So it makes us hungry. And it's just like this profound metabolic disturbance that is largely unexamined and uncovered. Even in the keto space and the low carb world, there's just not a lot of discussion. It's focusing on the branded stuff, the carbs, right? Mm-hmm. Low carb or the ketones. But I think it's so important to look at what are these seed oils doing to our metabolism. So that's what my latest book, The Fat Burn Fix, is all about. But I did start it with deep nutrition. I have 2 chapters in there that describe in some detail, and there's hundreds of references, how these seed oils are responsible for a lot of diseases that we've been blaming cholesterol for, as well as saturated fat. But really, cholesterol and saturated fat have been the fall guy for diseases and crimes committed by polyunsaturated, the excessive consumption of these things in the seed oil.
Yeah. What diseases are you referring to exactly?
Everything that has to do with inflammation, which is almost all the chronic diseases that I saw. So in other words, it's almost impossible to avoid things like diabetes, Alzheimer's, cancer, autoimmune disorders, very, very important, and eventually obesity, if your diet has these seed oils. And unless you're specifically avoiding them, it will.
And so what do we do generally if I see that let's say I'm gaining weight, I'm low on energy, what do we usually do instead of looking to the culprit?
Yeah. What do? We snack, right? Because if you feel hungry and you feel tired when you're hungry, the natural inclination is to think, well, I didn't eat enough with my last meal. But actually, you probably ate plenty. You could very well have eaten plenty. But what happens is your body really efficiently puts the calories from your last meal in storage. Much of it goes into your body fat. But when you're insulin resistant, which is one of the early stages of metabolic damage you get from these seed oils, when you're insulin resistant, your body fat doesn't get released into your bloodstream very efficiently. So you get hungry. And when you are more severely metabolically disturbed, like pre-diabetic or diabetic, when you try to burn your body fat, it doesn't give you energy. So for both of those reasons, either the lack of fat release from your body fat or the fact that the fats released are not going to give your cells the energy that they really need, both of those things that occur to people who are insulin resistant, pre-diabetic, or diabetic drive you to eat much more calories than you can possibly burn off on any given day. I mean, most people that are metabolically damaged end up eating somewhere around 600 to 800 more calories than they realize, which is many hundreds of calories more than they actually need. So that's why everybody feels like it's inevitable to gain weight as they get older. They just assume it's their metabolism slowing down, but it's a radically different process that's happening.
So all the doctors that are treating diabetics, people struggling with obesity or a heart condition, you may think they're looking in the wrong direction. Is that what I hear you saying?
They are totally looking in the wrong direction. And even a lot of times the low carb doctors, because I mean, they know a lot more about nutrition and how to advise people and help people, but they still often don't talk about the underlying cause of all this, which is the seed oils and the inflammatory reactions that occur that are the driver of all these diseases. So yeah, and regular doctors like myself, I didn't learn any of this in medical school.
So how did you get to the bottom of this? How did you discover that seed oils are at the root of some of these issues?
I couldn't have done it without a serious love of chemistry. I was actually a student of organic chemistry and biochemistry when I was at Cornell. And I was in their graduate program. And like 2002, when I got sick myself and my husband forced me to do something about my horrible diet, which was I had a huge sugar habit. I learned about these essential fatty acids and it blew my mind. You know, we all now know about the essential fatty acids, omega-3 and omega-6, but this was so long ago, you know, I hadn't learned it in medical school and hardly anybody knew what they were. And so with that information that not all fats were actually bad for us, here were some fats that our body needed and we needed to eat them because our bodies could not make them. I was fascinated. So after that, I just reread my entire biochemistry book and from cover to cover. And that's when I discovered the Weston Price Foundation and all of the information that you can get from it about traditional diets. And I realized that obviously, it's not like I realized it, it says in plain as day, there was a lot more saturated fat consumption. And so I had to do a lot of more research to really be comfortable overturning, essentially vetoing everything that I had been taught in medical school and becoming comfortable saying things like, yeah, lard is actually healthier than margarine.
Which is hard for people to hear even today, isn't it?
Yes, it really is. I mean, lard has it's like a derogatory term even.
It's true. Now, I noticed, by the way, I will definitely put a link in the show notes to that amazing graphic you have on the Hateful Eight. And I think you have some other really powerful images there on your site with that blog. But I was going to ask you, I think in that information, I also saw that you said that these rancid seed oils actually make us more vulnerable to COVID in your estimation. Can you explain why?
Yes, because the inflammation that they stimulate when you're really sick, you're not eating. So you're releasing your body fat. And if you've got these PUFAs, these polyunsaturated fatty acids, like if you had 0 of these, you wouldn't have an inflammatory reaction and you'd die of infections and you'd die of a lot of other things because you need them. They're essential. But when you have such an incredibly high amount in your body fat, and I'm talking about something like 20 to 30% of the average person's body fat now, especially if they're overweight, is PUFA, when it's supposed to be something like 2%. So we have 15 times more of this stuff, and that's being released into our bloodstream. It's going to react with oxygen in an uncontrolled manner that just causes polymerization, free radical cascades, and just out of control inflammation. It's like you're trying to put out a forest fire with a flamethrower. I mean, it makes the problem worse. And so the coronavirus stimulates inflammation. And then, unlike other viruses that we've been faced with, this one seems evolved to specifically hide behind the out of control inflammation that occurs in most people nowadays because we have this underlying condition called too much seed oil in our body fat.
Oh, right. So you're making me realize that when people get diagnosed with it and they're like, wait, that was a healthy man in his 30s, maybe he wasn't as healthy as we thought, right?
Absolutely. So there's a great comedian, Michael Yo, who's had me on his podcast twice now talking about what's happened to him after he was infected with corona. And he said he was so sick, he felt so bad that like if there was an out button of like, just like this was going to end everything, everything for me and I don't have to deal with this pain for another minute, he would have pressed it. That's how bad he felt. And he's a comedian. He has a great life, lives in LA. And so that's how bad it made him feel. And so he's been just really radically overhauling his diet. And he says he's just has so much more energy.
And actually, I don't know if you know this, Cate, but we at the Weston Price Foundation espouse the terrain theory. So we're convinced that this virus isn't necessarily a contagion, but rather a process that's happening on the cellular level where our cells are kind of excreting exosomes. But the point is, regardless of how you think this virus is spread or caught, the idea is if we are healthy because we're consuming the right kind of fats and not these PUFAs, we're likely to be able to resist whatever is happening in terms of trying to make us sick.
Yes, absolutely. Because you need your inflammatory response to be available to you to fight off the bad guys. But then you need your body to be able to limit the inflammatory response to the bad guys. So it doesn't just start attacking your tissues like willy-nilly. And that's what happens when a person is in the intensive care unit with the coronavirus infection and has ARDS, they call it, which stands for acute respiratory distress syndrome. And that's the thing that kills folks who are on the ventilators. One of the key things is the inflammation itself, not the virus. So the exosome theory sounds really interesting because actually that's how the virus is. Those of us who believe in the virus theory say that the virus actually escapes the cells through exosomes. So I wonder if there's really much disagreement. But anyway, so that's curious. I always love probing scientific boundaries in all directions and seeing if they ever end up in the same place, because a lot of times they do.
Right. That's so interesting. And sometimes, like you said, we have to kind of be open-minded and unlearn the things that we've kind of clung to so that we can discover something new.
Yes. Absolutely. That's what I did. I'm like the poster child.
So you overhauled your own diet and now you're trying to help other people do the same thing.
Yes. So this was back in 2002 or 3 that I started, my radical overhaul and turn everything upside down. And now that's how I live my days as a physician, helping people understand what their diseases really are, and in fact that they are really complications of the modern diet, which is super pro-inflammatory and extremely deficient in nutrients. And that's where deep nutrition comes in, right? So this is the first book where, kind of continuing in the vein of Weston Price's work and the work of your foundation, trying to explain to folks what that truly is a human diet, like what really is a traditional diet. And so that's what deep nutrition does with the 4 pillars of world cuisine. So we try to help my real passion is helping other healthcare practitioners understand that the science of nutrition didn't start with Ansel Keys in 1950 and his diet heart hypothesis, right? It didn't start with technology. It didn't start with understanding macros. It started before memory, right? Before human memory. It started with human beings caring for their family, making tasty food out of the healthiest parts of their edible world. And that is a science. And so encoded in the pages of every traditional cookbook, and by which I mean cookbooks usually 100 years older or more, is an enormous amount of traditional wisdom around that converting a healthy environment into a healthy human. So, and I love that, turning people's hearts towards cooking and just the love and joy of cooking and getting good quality food, and tastes good and it makes you feel better. It's good for your family. It's just good for everything. Yes. Good for the environment too.
I know, absolutely. And actually, that's one kind of blessing that's happened at this time, is that people are kind of getting in the kitchen again. But it's really important right now for us to help them understand this oil piece, because as Sally says, there's been an oiling of America. And in a way, we've been sold some snake oil into thinking that the vegetable oils and the canola oils and the things lining the supermarket shelves that look so nicely packaged and so bright yellow are actually the last thing we're going to want in our diet.
Right. And they are the first things that you should cut out for that very reason. But they do sneak their way into your body through so many products that it can feel a little bit overwhelming when you start going through your kitchen and your refrigerator and turning those products around to look at the ingredients label. It's not in the nutrition facts. It's in the ingredients label. And you just got to scan for those hateful 8. And, you'll see them in crackers. You'll see them in food bars. You'll see them in cereals, salad dressings, sauces. So I have actually also on my website free, a shopping guide to a lot of the newer products that are being created that are made with olive oil or avocado oil or coconut oil, or one of the healthier, stable, life-giving, energy-giving fats instead of the seed oils.
Very good. Well, we'll put a link in the show notes to that too. But I wanted to ask you, you didn't mention peanut oil, and we often get questions about that. Where does that fall?
So peanut oil is a traditional oil in Africa, where they call it ground nut, right? Because it tastes like a nut, but it grows on the ground. And it's kind of an exception to the seed oils, because technically peanut is a seed, right? Like the other traditional oils are technically fruits, coconut, avocado, and olive, right? That we're using the pulp to get the oil. So the peanuts are seeds, but they are extremely generous in their ability to give off the oil, so that when you refine that or when you extract it, you don't need to use such harsh processing the way that you do with the other seeds. And because they are far lower in PUFAs, they do have a lot of PUFAs, but nowhere near as much as the soy and nowhere near the instability problem of canola. So that's why I recommend peanut oil. That is the part of it. And then the other part is that because it doesn't have to be refined, because it's so generous in giving up its fats, you easily extract it. And that means you don't need to use high heat or high pressure. And so it's not damaged in the process, and you don't need to refine it like some places do. And I don't recommend that kind of peanut oil. But the lack of refining means that the antioxidants that come out with the oil are still there. So they help to stabilize it as you cook it and even as you eat it. And so this is like another whole discussion, is what happens when you consume, what happens to your microbiome when your diet is so high in these pro-inflammatory PUFAs. But so it's important for that oil to be stabilized with the stuff that's in the peanuts and, whatever it is, whether it's olives or so on and so forth, the antioxidants that are in the plant that stabilize it. You should cook it with that, and of course consume it with that present, because it's going to stabilize it along that whole journey from the seed into the bottle, into the pan, and then onto your plate and through your digestive tract.
I hadn't heard anyone present it quite like that, so that's really helpful. Now, what about cod liver oil?
So cod liver oil, obviously you wouldn't cook with, right?
No, gosh, no.
It's a supplement. It's a different category, really. It's a supplemental oil, and there's, people have amazing health benefits and turnarounds from that. But the downside is because the polyunsaturates in cod liver oil are some of the most fragile and oxidation prone on the planet, that it has to be really high quality, extracted really, really carefully, ideally in a low oxygen environment with nitrogen or something to suppress the reactions. And then, you have to consume it quickly before it oxidizes.
Coming up, Cate speaks to us about the difference between rancidity and oxidation, and she also explains the difference between various oil extraction processes.
You're listening to the Wise Traditions podcast from the Weston A. Price Foundation. We pause now to recognize our sponsors.
Thanks to many people just like you, North Star Bison is celebrating over 25 years of healing the land and feeding people well. Their focus from day one at North Star has been to raise meat as nature intended, to regenerate vital native habitats that sink mega amounts of carbon, which improve air and water quality, and support native wildlife, trillions of insects, and even fish, all while providing nutrient-rich, deeply nourishing foods that taste amazing and leave us feeling satisfied. At North Star, they even field harvest their animals to respect and preserve the dignity of life, as well as provide the tender, superior quality of product that nature intends. At North Star Bison, their flagship product is their 100% grass-fed and finished bison, but their offerings have grown to include Rocky Mountain elk, 100% grass-fed and finished beef and lamb, rabbit, pastured corn and soy-free pork, corn and soy-free chicken and turkey, 100% grass-fed raw cheeses, wild Alaskan sockeye salmon, raw pet foods, and so much more. Our family recently got an order, and we are just head over heels in love with North Star Bison. Their products are top-notch, as they say, and the taste is delicious. So order from them today. Go to northstarbison.com and spend over $250 and get free shipping. And feel free to use the code WAPF at checkout to get an additional 10% off your order. Again, go to northstarbison.com and rediscover food as nature intended. And this episode is brought to you in part by bovine tracheal cartilage by Ancestral Supplements. Ancestral Supplements makes New Zealand-sourced, nose-to-tail, organ meats, bone marrow, and bovine tracheal cartilage in simple, convenient gelatin capsules. The life work of Dr. John F. Pruden showed that bovine tracheal cartilage had unique and powerful effects on wound healing, immune conditions, joint health, and other conditions considered to be treatment-resistant to conventional therapies. All of these conditions were immune in nature, with the exception of the wound healing studies. According to Dr. Pruden, bovine cartilage closely resembles fetal mesenchyme, the primordial tissue from which muscle, bone, tendons, ligaments, skin, fat, and bone marrow, the heart of the immune system, all develop. Bovine tracheal cartilage provided concentrated amounts of connective tissue, immunoregulators, and cartilage building blocks that are now missing from the modern diet. So visit ancestralsupplements.com to see what they can do for you. Ancestral Supplements, putting back in what the modern world left out. This is Holistic Hilda, and you're listening to Wise Traditions.
I don't know if you want to touch on this at all, but there's a important difference between what causes rancidity and what I'm talking about, which is oxidation. And this is a chemistry thing. And, a lot of folks will use culinary terms in a slightly different way than the chemical term.
Sure. Go into it, please.
So the rancidity technically is a free fatty acid, comes from free fatty acids. And so what that refers to, you have to understand that when you're having an oil or any kind of fat, butter, coconut, you're consuming these things called triglycerides. And these are made out of 3 fatty acids, hence the tri, bound to a glyceride. And that's why they're called triglycerides. So you don't need to remember any of this, but the key point is that the rancidity comes from enzymes that release one or more of the free fatty acids from that triglyceride. So you can have a rancid taste even in an oil that is healthy, believe it or not, because the rancidity comes from, human beings do not like the taste of most free fatty acids. Now, dogs and animals that consume carrion and, fats that have been released from their triglyceride by the decay process, they love that taste. So that's a little bit of a different taste. And so you really can't tell by taste when an oil is oxidized. You don't look for the rancid taste. What you would look for is almost like the absence of taste or a diminished taste. So it's an important point, I feel like, because the chefs start to get confused about what oil is good for them to cook with if they don't understand that point.
Mm-hmm. That's super interesting because I have heard people say, well, cod liver oil tastes so bad, it must be rancid. But from what you're saying, that might not be the case because we can't tell by taste alone.
Correct. We can't tell when it's oxidized by taste alone. If it's refined, we notice the absence of taste. And so that's another marker of an unhealthy oil. Like if you're buying peanut oil, but it has no flavor, it's not anywhere near as healthy for you. It's kind of in my okay list. It's not good. It's not as toxic as the seed oils, but it's not going to be healthy the way that a full-bodied, flavorful, unrefined, delicious, peanutty flavored peanut oil is going to be.
Well, this is another reason it's confusing is because, again, in the supermarket or even at the farmer's market, if you go to a little oil stand, sometimes there'll be labels on the oil such as expeller or cold pressed. And, you end up scratching your head like, what does that mean? Is that better? Can you address that at all, Cate?
Yes, I'm so glad you brought that up because it does kind of fool a lot of folks, especially if they're shopping at an expensive chain, you know who I mean, right? and the expeller pressed is the first part of the processing. You can expeller press any oil, right? Olive oil should be expeller pressed as opposed to solvent extracted. Mm-hmm. So it's really just a mechanical extraction versus a solvent extraction. And obviously it's the superior thing, right? You just squeeze it gently, more gently, the more healthy. And so it's just meant to distinguish it from high pressure and hexane extraction that's used. And that's only the first of many, many processing steps that ultimately damage the nutrients that were present in the seed. Mm-hmm. So it's not like you can't have sunflower, I list sunflower. I know there's a little bit of controversy on that one. Personally, my take is that the chemistry says sunflower, seed oils don't do so well once they've been processed and refined, and they have. So sunflower and canola and cottonseed and soy beans themselves, I think those are, they're natural, right? And they have been used in traditional cuisines for years, not cottonseed, not canola, but the ones that have, like the familiar ones, the soy and the corn, of course, and rapeseed has been used as a traditional kind of like supplemental oil for a long time in India. But so the traditional use of these things as foods, as intact seeds, or as extremely gently extracted, like flax would not be something that could withstand factory processing. But flax oil used to be extracted from a wedge press in your kitchen, and it was mechanically extracted. You'd bang on the wedge and it would just produce a couple more drops of like a golden, beautiful, flavorful oil that was not refined in any way. But the canola that says expeller pressed has been refined.
That's just how they started the process. It's not like they didn't do anything else to it.
And that refining is so damaging.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's exactly what Sally addresses, I think, in her DVD, The Oiling of America. And so, it's really, really important to get this information out. I'm so grateful that you're sharing some of these thoughts and helping us wrap our heads around these concepts that we see on the labels. Now, if we're going to cook with these oils, well, I imagine we're not going to cook with any of these oils if we can help it. You said they will also be in our foods, right? I guess salad dressing is one of the main culprits, or one of the main places we'd find it. Yeah,
it's in all junk foods. I say it's the defining feature of junk food, right? Like, a Twinkie, a candy bar, a store-bought cookie, fast food, French fries. These are all super high sources of really bad seed oils. Not only are they bad because of all the reasons we've already talked about, but when you make fried foods and we make a lot of these processed foods, they've been reheated multiple times. So they're like the worst of the worst. And
so it's inside, but also it was used for cooking it, and it's just all over the place, all over that food.
If you're not avoiding these things, then the average American gets 80% of their fat calories from these things, 80%, right? That leaves only 20% from actual natural whole food fat sources, whether it's plants or animals. But, and it's like somewhere between 30 and 50% of their total calories for the day. So this is like the single most common ingredient in many people's diets, and nobody's talking about it except for the figureheads at places like Tufts and Harvard that say that we need to be eating more of these vegetable oils or seed oils.
No, they're not really saying that, are they?
They are. I'm serious. You can go. Oh, yes, I know. It's just so irresponsible. I mean, I'm sure these doctors, either they just have no clue of what they're talking about and they're just parroting information, or they know that they're saying it because that's where their funding comes from. But you can go on to, there's a Dr. Dariush Mozaffarian who was on Real Time with Bill Maher a few weeks after I was. And he's from Tufts, has a school of nutrition, and he's like the dean of that school. And when you look at that school's website and what kind of foods they are trying to push people to consume more of, they have a list of 4 or 5 foods that people need to be eating more of them. And believe it or not, vegetable oils is one of them.
And now the people who are actually following that advice, what do you think their lives and their health looks like?
I mean, it's horrible. You look around and you just look at the news, and that's why we have so many people getting so sick from the coronavirus. If you take away these seed oils, you take away anyone under 65 in the hospital. They won't need to be in the hospital. Their immune system will just, eradicate the coronavirus, and many of them won't even know that they were sick. And that is the case. And, the company that I work for, I've dealt with about 130 cases now of potential coronavirus, and somewhere around 30 to 40 actual positive results there. And it's run the spectrum from, I didn't know I had it. I just got tested because my wife had to get tested and I wanted to give her support with that nasty nose poke, right? To, unfortunately, someone who died. And that difference, when I look at their lab tests, it was predictable. And there are predictable lab tests that you will see when a person's body is overloaded with these seed oils that their metabolism is incapable of controlling inflammation. And that's what I do. That's what I spend my days doing every day, working with patients, is helping them understand where their metabolism is at based on lab tests, and, history and everything else, and understanding like what health they can expect when they do the hard work of getting these seed oils out of their daily diets. I mean, you can imagine if somebody's getting 50% of their calories from these things, it's going to take a kind of an overhaul to get them out. And that's really challenging for a lot of folks who, and this company is a retail company. So they're working hard, they're working long hours. And when they come home from work, they're tired. And how are they going to do something other than just order, a bucket of KFC? Killer chicken.
That's a great way to put it. And I really shouldn't be laughing, but that caught me by surprise. Oh my gosh, Cate. No, you were so right. And I just want to ask you as we start to wrap up 2 final questions. One, can you repeat the list of the hateful 8 so we can keep our eye on them and look for them on our labels and do our best to avoid them? Can you repeat what they are?
Here's a mnemonic, 3 C's and 3 S's. So corn, canola, cottonseed, soy, sunflower, safflower. And then there's like the sometimes Y, with the vowels, the grapeseed and the rice bran. They're kind of dangling at the end. Those last 2, though, those are just going to be in restaurants. They have not made their way into products in the grocery store. So you really mostly need to memorize when you're shopping the 3 C's and the 3 S's.
Well, and the GR could stand for get rid.
Yeah,
get rid
I love
of,
it.
Right? That's awesome. These things just come to me. Anyway, I'm being silly. Okay. Well, Cate, this has been fantastic. I am on the same page. I know the foundation is too. We're on the same page with you. We really appreciate your work. And I just want to ask you, so if the listener could do one thing, just one thing, Cate, to improve their health, what would you recommend that they do?
A healthy breakfast, because breakfast is the most important meal of the day not to screw up. Because if you get the wrong kinds of fats or too much sugary, starchy carbohydrate, it's going to set you on a path of energy highs and lows for the whole day. So if you just get your breakfast right, you won't be so driven to snack. You'll be able to concentrate better, and it's going to set you up on a good day. And a couple examples of healthy breakfast is just eggs with bacon, eggs cooked in butter, sprouted grain bread toasted with avocado, half an avocado and a little salt sprinkled on it, or like yogurt, whole milk yogurt, ideally pasture raised if you can get it, with a little bit of nuts and seeds and some fresh berries on it. So those are 3 popular, super fast ideas anyone can do.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. That sounds great. And we really appreciate your time today. It's been a pleasure.
Hilda, it's been so nice talking to you. It's really fun.
Our guest today was Dr. Cate Shanahan. Visit her website, drcate.com, for more resources. And I'm Hilda Labrada-Gore. You can find me at holistichilda.com. For the show notes for this and every podcast episode, visit our website, westonaprice.org, and click on the podcast page. And now for a letter from a recent journal. I want to take a moment to express my gratitude to the Weston A. Price Foundation, Joel Salatin, and everyone in this movement. I'm 29 years old. 5 short years ago, I was vegan. Today, I own 24 acres, 6 beef and dairy cows, 50 meat birds, and laying hens, and 2 goats. I've learned how to ferment my own veggies, fruit, and dairy for long-term preservation. I've learned how to prepare compost properly and rotate animals to keep my land productive. I have 3 perfectly healthy kids under 6. We are not afraid and perfectly prepared for whatever the markets, medical system, and public institutions of all kinds throw at us. I have a very strong sense of purpose that I've never had before. I've discovered all kinds of jobs that are beneficial for people and the environment, ways to save local economies and the world. So thank you everyone for the time and effort. We're one of many families you've saved. That's from Brianne in Canada. Brianne, it is our pleasure to get this information out. And feel free to submit your own letter for the journal or rate and review our podcast on Apple Podcasts. It's just one way you can support the work we do. And thank you so much for listening. That's it, everybody. Hasta pronto.
On behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation, thanks for listening. We have many free resources to support you on your health journey. Visit westonaprice.org to find podcasts, articles, videos, and more. You can also find a local chapter near you for help in finding sources of great food. We invite you to support the Foundation's mission of education, research, and activism by becoming a member. Thanks again, and take care. Wise Traditions is a project of the Weston A. Price Foundation for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. The content on this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended to substitute for the advice provided by your doctor or other healthcare professional. It is not intended to be, nor does it constitute healthcare or medical advice.